Right. So, as I said, Cron sequencer, a module to replay Crontabs, and this is a talk about this module and the pitfalls on the way. And as I think I joked in the abstract, the first 80% is about. There was an 80%, and then the second 80% is we had to do it all. Sorry, I'm forgetting my own jokes. I've got speaker notes, but not for that. Right. So I am panicking. Let's panic less. So the abstract, the structure of this talk, I'm going to outline the problem we had at work, our solution to the problem, the point where we got about most of the way through, and no plan survives contact with the enemy. Had to completely redo my design. How I then used Getopt long to do command line passing in an interesting way, and certain features of Getopt long that are fairly obscure but proved to be very useful, and where we are now. And at this rate, I'm well ahead, so I should slow down and be careful. Work is on the next slide. I have to remember what the hell I'm doing. We'll get to my employer in a moment. Cron. Cron is a job scheduler for Unix operating systems. It runs commands at set repeating times. These commands are described by lines in what is known as a crontab file. There will be examples of that later. Cron itself dates from 1975. It's fairly old school. And the fun bit is that Debian, and therefore Ubuntu, which is what we're using in production, ships a variant of Cron, VixiCron 3, which dates from 1996. They have added some patches, like some patches from VixiCron 4, but we're basically talking something in Perl terms of the era of 5.005_03. So this thing is quite old. So as to work, right. I should have said my employer is PayProp. We deal with rent payments. We provide software services to agencies who manage properties for landlords. We're dealing with rent payments, the movement of money. And the innards of the system that moves the money around and talks between our platform and the banks is all done with a whole lot of batch processing on machines in a colo, and they're all scheduled by Crontab. The company was founded in 2001, originally as a charity payments company, Give and Gain, and then about 3 years later, the co-founders, two South African brothers, figured that actually rent payments seemed to be pretty much the same as charity, and they could make this thing, they could use the same code base to address a different problem. And so the code was effectively forked quite a long time ago, and the code has evolved continuously for 21 years. And, well, maybe 22 now. That means the code is certainly battle tested. There's a mature, stable business built on this, but I can't say that it's totally regression tested. Which is where we come in, because testing is my next slide. We want to refactor this code. We want to do this without going bankrupt. And we do need to test the corner cases. And we don't actually know where the corner cases are. So, that's easy. Just rerun history. Take all your data and play it again with whatever. That's how we're going to go. So, how are we going to rerun history? Well, we take two copies of the code. We take our original code and our new code. We want to test a refactoring. And then for each of these, we're going to set up a database and some local files, because banks love plain text files. Fixed width files. Then we're going to set the clock to a particular time in history. We're going to run our code, and then we're going to compare what we got out from both of these. And if they're identical, we're golden, like golden results testing. That's where there's a groan. There are better jokes, allegedly. Now, the nuance here is this won't be exactly what we have in production, because we're usually running newer code than we had from that time we're testing. But in production, we'll have the database state from running the code of the time at the time. So we're not going to identically match production, but we should get to the point of if the old code and the new code, today's code and tomorrow's code run now and produce the same results, that's good. We don't actually care if yesterday's code produces the same code as today's code. So we won't spot all regressions, but we're going to spot most or nearly all regressions with, we think, less effort than trying to write regression tests, loads and loads of regression tests, and basically not knowing where our corner cases are. So we just do that. Now, hang on. What? Oh! This is where I'm not driving my things like. So, yeah, someone I know through my father is a builder, and he has this joke that the just job. Can you just do that? He said they're always the worst. In turn, I joked he should put a taximeter in his digger. When they say just, start the numbers spinning and see where we get to. So, yeah, we just want to rerun the code. That's easy. We've got two things we're trying to get. We want to be fast. We want to be testing correctness and speed. Correctness. We are testing interactions with external systems, banks. I think some of you heard me privately ranting about banks. Yeah, our South African bank screwed something up over the weekend. Our Canadian bank is, telling us alternative facts. And I almost want to re-record and badmouth them because they deserve it, but I think I shouldn't. We want to test that with banks. We don't have their code base. We don't have their config. So we're not actually going to write emulators for their banks or anything like that. We're just going to make the files we got historically appear on schedule in the right place in the directory they will put it. We just want to, ping their thing into existence and then check that we generate later the same file that we would send to them. But we don't care that when we send them a rebuilt historic file, that they produce rebuilt historic output. We'll just reuse their old output. We aren't trying to emulate their system. We're just trying to treat our system as a box in itself and make sure the edges of it produce the same output. So we're not trying to emulate the banks. As to speed, some of our code runs only once a month. There are reports at the start of the month that get generated monthly. Some of the code is end of year. Some of the corner cases are quite rare. So 90% of the code we run at least doing this is not going to tell us anything we didn't know, but we don't know what that 5% or that 1% are. So this was intended to be just a brute force it project of run lots of code. So we're trying to be correct in speed, we're trying to be fast and good. So we need to accelerate time, else each run will take months, because we probably actually need to run about 3 months of history to get, and probably sort of like November to January to get over the end of year stuff, and a couple of month ends. And we don't want each run to take 3 months. So that's where we're going with this. We want to be fast and good. We want to take a list of when things are going to happen. We want to set up our initial state. We want to run code for that instance of time or that very short amount of time. We want to capture the modified state after running one batch script. And then we want to test the two. As I said, we're going to do this much faster than real time, and we're just going to assume that the banks gave us the same answer as last time, even if we send them the wrong thing. We're not trying to emulate them. So, what do we have? This was what I was, in the next slide, I was hoping someone would take a picture of the next slide because I want to wind up a friend. But anyway, what we have is a Crontab. This is a Crontab. I finally got to a Crontab. If you're not familiar with the Crontab, what you have, I should stick them in the microphone, shouldn't I? There's line columns for minutes, hours. Let's see if I can get this right. Minutes, hours, date of month, date in the month, day of the month, and day of the week, I think. But these are all stars, meaning for every. So you can translate the first line, and there's lots of code out there that will translate the first line. So the first line says at 0 minutes past hour 8 and 10, have coffee. The second line says, at 0 minutes past hour 9 and 11, drink tea. Well, tea. And the last one says, at 12:30, have lunch. And that's great. Fine. But I've got 3 bits there of, you do the coffee twice, you do the tea twice, and you have lunch. What I don't have there, what I wanted was a list of instructions of coffee, tea, lunch. Nothing, that's what I'm trying to solve, and we went out to look. What I want, told you this is where I drive it wrong. What I want, Waves Arms code appears, is that I get this list, that 8 o'clock coffee, 9 o'clock tea, 10 o'clock coffee, 11 o'clock tea, 12:30 lunch. So that then I can set my time to like 3 seconds to 8, run the coffee code, stop, capture the output, whiz time forwards to 3 minutes to 9 or 3 seconds to 9, run the T code, whiz time forwards, and so on. And what is out there? What do we need? Where am I going now? Oh, spacebar will do this. What I need is a sequence of events, a time range. And what I also need it with environment variables, because crontabs let you specify overrides from environment variables, and we are using that. And I need it to be 100% accurate in that I want to take this crontab and I actually want to shell out and run the code. Now, to be clear, I only need to be good enough to shell out for our crontabs. Because what cron actually does is take the entire line and sends it to the shell, which is doing all the variable interpolation and backtick type things, or I'm old school, I'm still using backticks. Solaris 10 only supports backticks. It's still in service. Anyway, you don't have to do that. So all you have to be good enough is to actually run our crontabs, which are fairly simple in their syntax. And if I'm being thorough, to detect the cases I can't deal with, in terms of, oh, I know I can't deal with environment variables being set in the command line, boom, because then our stuff will still work, but the general case I should fail correctly rather than falling over. One of our little nuances is there's a script out on the internet called cron_tz, which is used to sleep for a while and then run it in a particular time zone. So if you want to run at 11 o'clock in some part of Canada where your time zone is even 11 o'clock in the UK, and you mean 11 o'clock wall clock time, in the summertime, that's going to be 1000 GMT, and in the wintertime, 1100 GMT. And so what you do is you have a crontab entry that says 1000 GMT, and then you run the shell script, and it goes as a time zone lookup, and it either goes, I'm sleeping for 3600 seconds, or it's going right now. And I do have to handle that in the future, and I haven't done that yet. Because as you can tell, if I've got one of these and it sleeps for 3,600 seconds, I don't really want my test rig to be sleeping for 3,600 seconds So I need to kind of find a way to process those to say, reschedule a job in the future. But that's future plans, because as you'll find out where we got to, we didn't. So, prior art. How am I doing? Weirdly on time, I think. What I found out there was there are lots of things that think they pass crontab files. Not always correctly. Yeah, I looked at the C source and went, that's not what it does. There are things like I showed you that will take crontab lines and convert those lines to descriptions of what happens. There are things out there that will replace the cron daemon and run crons in real time. Which is not what I need, because I can set the clock on a virtual machine back in history and get the cron daemon to run in real time in the past, and that still takes 3 months for 3 months. What I did find was a module, algorithm cron, in particular has this method, next time. Given an epoch time, it will you build an object and then say, with one of those crontab lines, and if you say, at this epoch time, when will this rule next fire? Describing itself as an abstract implementation of the cron scheduling algorithm. This is looking good. Do I have my problem solved? All I need to do is write a parser, and all I need to do, therefore, in crontab file is deal with comments. Rules that set, lines that set environment variables, lines that run crontab commands, and to be thorough, syntax errors, because there are various things that the real cron won't pass as such, and I need to write a parser. I write a parser that does all of those. I take, for each rule that will run, I'm going to collect everything into the command it shall run and the environment that shall run with that. And then for each of those, I ask algorithm cron, when will you next fire? I find the earliest. I set my clock to that. I run things. And then I resort the list to find the next thing to do. But actually, you don't have to, subtle implementation detail, you don't have to resort. If you sort them all into next firing order, and you take the one at the front, the rest of them are all sorted. This one now says, I'm 3 hours later. You just find the right place in the list. So rather than being on, whatever it is, n squared of resorting, n log n, I think, sorry, you can do it in, I think, on time. So it's slightly faster than that. We just fire things. And that'll be good. So there's no one. There's one person who's not going to get the German joke here. He's too asleep. So you get some environment variables set up, like sheep and brave, and run the drink thing. So that's part of my command line trouble is that I'd have to set up environment variables. So my output from this, as I made a debugging system, was what's going on, but it rarely show you every environment variable. So for everything, it would show you environment variables. We have tasks that run every 5 minutes in Cron. These are not very exciting, but if I'm trying to look at this to work out what's going to happen, I don't need every 5 minutes to be peppered with, oh, I sync to this thing. I poll that system. Oh, I poll that system. Oh, I poll that system. So to make my debugging output clearer, I wanted to add features to do things like suppress the environment on output. I can assume that my path variable is going to be set to this. I can assume that mail2 is going to be set to this. Don't show me this every time. If they've got those things every 5 minutes, I say, don't show me that thing every 5 minutes. Don't show me the entry on the Crontab file at line 50 because I don't care that I know it's happening every 5 minutes. Why am I telling you this? Because I needed to add those features and they're going to hurt me in the near future. So those are our problems. Default envars, noisy repeating lines, my solutions, suppress output, suppress this command by output. We are nearly done. There's plenty of time for questions. Of course, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Because I got there, I thought, hey, I'm nearly done. And then I realized there are two hosts. There's the processing system to talk to the banks and the batch system that is the back end of the website. Each of these hosts has a crontab. Each of these crontabs has noisy output. Cool, I just read in two crontab files. I lace them together. But each of these is like my file, and my environment suppression, I ignore the environment variable on this line, is for the line number in this file, or the repeated for that file. And they're different for the two files, and they should not be confused. So now I start needing to put all of that, don't tell me about line 15, per file, and I've made an architecture where I put that in the output section, not the input section, and I pretty much had to redo it from the start. Had to rethink my design. I had to move the environment handling from the output section to the input section. I had to pass my options multiple times. I had an insight here. So this shows how old school I am. In the X server, you would use -- to separate the complete command line of the X server you were going to start from the thing you were going to start in it, typically an X term. No, actually, the window manager. So realized that you could put -- and have a set of options to deal with some things, -- and more options to deal with some files, -- more options to deal with things. So you get what you have at the bottom here. I hope my head's not in the way a bit. Command environment variable. Assume that environment variable is set to that for file 1. Okay, for file 2, ignore lines 4 and 7. And the ignore applies to file 2, the environment applies to file 1, and obviously you can have ends and ignores on that, and you can have lots of them. Right. That's fun, but how do I actually implement that? Well, there's some interesting features of Getopt long. Getopt long, for those of you who don't know it, is a module, I think it's in the core, it's a command line parser. It passes GNU-style long options with double dashes. It has this feature of taking double dash as the end of the things to pass. So that third line, I haven't remembered this talk, sorry. The third line is -- option is treated as an option, and it puts it in the hash or how it usually returns. If you're using it complicated style, you get a hash of options back. So it puts it in the options hash. Double dash there. That says options end here, ignore the rest. And it will leave -- argument as your argument. It actually just mangles at argv, or at least in default way, it mangles at argv. So you have a long list of argv things. It takes out all the things it thinks are options and leaves all the rest in the same order. Well, unless you tell it not to. Unless you tell it not to, because it's very configurable. And one of the things is it doesn't just pass at argv. You can tell it to pass any array. Non-default feature, but turns out to be useful. There are no presenter notes. What did I think? So what I did was, for trying to pass that, grouping. I would iterate along at argv. I'd split on -- So I can't reach that, and I don't have a laser pointer. And then I would treat the first two bits, dash dash m foo equals bar file 1, as a 3-argument array. And I'd go a bit further, dash dash ignore 4,7 file 2 as another 3-argument array. And then I go around my loops of arrays. I would say the first one of those and call get options from array and strip out some options for it. And those would be my options for passing the first one. And then I do it for the second one and so on. And for each of these, I populate my options hash with options. And at group is the equivalent of the reference to the array. It modifies that. So I should have put a line in here saying the default would have been like you call, that would be at argv in the get options simple version. So now I've given it a custom array. So it takes the first one. So the first time it will strip out dash dash m as an option and leave the other two in. Sorry, m and foo equals bar as argument. It'll strip those two out, leave file 1. The second one, it'll leave file 2. So after the end of this, I have a set of options and a much shorter array of file names, hopefully not empty. Just realizing that I don't have a regression test for that. Lots of arm waving, but I have a speaker note here that says this was 25 lines of code. 10 for doing the split and 15 for doing the parsing. So I can implement all of this in an extremely small amount of code because get options, the module, is very powerful once you know where all the twiddly things are. Right. Slide 21, it says. Right. Of 30. Cron sequence. So the first one, I've got an overlay of the video on there, so it's a bit confusing. The first one is I want to show me the events for tomorrow. That's a global option for everything output. I have some options that apply to everything, like what time range am I showing? And the simplest was show tomorrow. The default actually, I think, is show the last hour. I can't remember for sure. But show is for everything. Env only applies to that file. For this file, default to assume that environment foo has value bar. And then after double dashes, I have some arguments for the second file. This is fine. This should work. The second line down, I've moved the show beyond the double dash. I want that to be an error because you could put show date range options and other goody options all over the place. But I want that to be an error. So how do I do this? One of the options to configuration of Getopt long is called pass-through. If you find an option you don't understand, return it. Don't throw an error. So what I do for the first one is, I have to remember this, I should have practiced more, is to say pass-through, and that will strip out all the per file arguments, leaving you the rest. And then I pass it and take the global options out, like the show range and a couple of other formatting options. What format do I want on the output? Then I reconfigure Getopt long not to pass through. So at this point, any strange errors are really errors. So I have my global options to configure my output objects and my per group options to configure my input objects. For the first of my split up command line, I pass for both. And for the others, I only pass for output options. And by now I've told it all things you don't know are errors. I will successfully, it will trap errors for the first one on the global pass. I'm not explaining that too well. But anyway, the point was I can do all of this, including making the first one work and the second one not work by fiddling with Getopt. And the code is on CPAN. There might even be a live demo of this. I've got that right. So, bringing that together, we split on dash dash into groups. We tell it to, this was it, inverse route, sorry. We tell it to do pass-through so that things it doesn't recognize. We pass the global options out of the first group. There must be one group. We then tell it no pass-through, and we tell it to pass per file options. Anything we didn't recognize at this point becomes a command line passing error. But this is how I can have more options available at the start and only a subset of options later by doing 2 passes of options and configuring pass-through. Pass-through is a useful feature. So, stop panicking. The next slide apparently says live demo. Oh! Where did my terminal go? Ha! Right, there's speaker notes for this. Let's see what happens. There might even have been... Where's this? So let's actually pull that back. That's the command line. Oh, I hope you can read that. Again, that's showing the crontab for today. Oh, better plan. That's my crontab. Ah, Max, you might get the joke. So we set two environment variables. Sheep is set to Kölsch. If you're brave, you're drinking alt beer. And then at these times we drink. But what does that mean? So, what have I just done? I thought, oh, that was my other crontab. That was the first crontab. Sorry. So, crontab shown earlier where lunch is at 12:30. Coffee has not much milk, tea has lots of milk as my environment variables. So I've got two different values. That means when I run the coffee command, milk will be set to little, and when I run the tea command, milk will be set to lots. That's my work crontab. Play was the drinking one, and they mesh together, and I think, yeah, that's work. So, show me today, assume if foo is set to this in the environment. Oh yeah, showing both of them, work and play. Ignore lines 4 and 7 from work, which I think are the tea and coffee lines, and that messes the two up. But anyway, what I really wanted to show you was, oh yeah, that's ignoring the environment setting line, sorry. It shows you that work is coffee, then tea, then coffee, then tea, then lunch. And then we get to the play crontab, which is saying there is no variable foo, a slightly wonky syntax. Those are your two environment variables, set, drink, and then we keep drinking. Funny that. So that's that command line. If we put show today after the dash dash, error, unknown option show. Show is only valid before the dash dash. Don't worry, we don't have that. So that shows one crontab, lines 4 and 7, so that's ignoring the environment, and it's just showing you one. I can't remember why I thought that was useful. Ah, yes, enemy. Meetings are the enemy of lunch. So what we have here is lunch and meeting are scheduled at the same time. So it will show you a single date, and then it will tell you these two things are going to run at the same time, because this is relevant to what I need. I don't want it to say, oh, 12:30 we do something. Oh, 12:30 we do something. I need to set my time to 12:30 and then do everything that happens at 12:30 simultaneously. If there are two machines I'm having to run in parallel, I want that. So that was the point of that one. What I can remember is funf needs an umlaut, and I can't do umlauts on this keyboard. So there is a JSON output format. Ah, that's not very pretty, is it? Why did I use Roman numerals for this? No, I did call it 6, sorry. There's a JSON pretty format. This is going to be better. So, you can get JSON out. Which file was it? Which line was it? When is the epoch time? What command are we running? And the when is what is the crontab line that did this? I don't think I've got any environment variables in this. Let me... Oh yeah, I've got a flag to hide all the environment variables. Let's put the environment variables back. There, so we have command line, and we've got an environment array for each of them as well. So if I wanted to shell out and run that command, I've got pretty much all I need to know. I know I'm going to run the command coffee. I'm going to set this environment up first, and this is the time I'm going to do it. And we can keep going, and we have a meeting and lunch at conflict. That was, I think, most of the live demo. Oh, the last bit of the JSON was actually, there's a no group option. So that is taking lunch and meeting. It's right down the bottom. They're showing us two chunks of JSON. if I take that out, is a second level of arrays. So you see mostly there are trivial arrays of one thing, but here we've got an array that says there are two events that are happening together. So I can use this thing to generate JSON and feed it into something else. I was assuming we were going to use it in Perl code, which is where we get to the where are we, but I made a JSON output because I thought this would be a useful tool for other things. I am sorry, I am speaking too quickly. So that, I think, is most of the live demo. Of course, we can go back to that, but let's wang back to the slides. Fix me, that was fixed. So, yeah, where are we? Apart from being quite early, don't worry. Knows plan survives contact with the enemy. Good timing. Don't worry. I set my phone to silent because I thought... Although, Max, if I don't, everyone will find out what my ringtone is. So it's on CPAN, and actually I think that's the last release because, oh my, that's quite a while back. We got to that point instead that I went off on a project to write virtual machines that would trap all the external output. Because we started with a code base where all things were hard-coded, like the bank server address. And whilst we wouldn't have the correct SSH keys locally, we'd be smacking this thing with the requests. We'd get, hopefully their alerting would go, ooh, and we'd get firewalled or slap wrists or who knows. And it would send email quite happily. All of that had to be turned off. Don't do this, don't do that. Did that. That then became useful to start off. We had 4 forked code bases for each of the countries we served with different. We merged that into one repository. And we got to the point where I was looking at a library called libfaketime, which is in Debian and various others, that will let you run the system clock at a different time as a shared library override, rather than our original plan of we actually turn the system clock to a different time. And libfaketime looks to be good enough to say these processes together see the same faked up time, which means I can make the MySQL daemon and my Perl system both use the fake time. And then a lot of other work happened. So not yet done primary task. Yeah, this is actually where we got to. And if you saw me at the German Perl workshop, nothing's changed apart from 6 months, 4 months has passed. It has been very useful to rerun history. If, for example, the batch server falls over and we want to know what should have run in the last hour, rather than having to go through the crontab and pick apart all those lines and go tea, coffee, meeting, oh, I missed lunch. Instead, we can just say, tell me what should have happened between this range and this range, and it will show you the list of commands you need to rerun, that should have run, and then you can choose what to rerun in sequence. That has been very useful. And that is where we get to the question slide, and I don't know if anyone's good enough for the maths on that one. So yeah, do ducks swim in circles? I mean, are we hiring, and are there bonus slides? And I think you can figure from the first answer what the other answers are going to be. Would you like the bonus slides? There's a nod. At least 2 feet. Yay! So I started looking, and I've been a core developer for quite a while, even longer than that. And if you're writing code in the core, you're not relying on non-core modules. And actually, it's a bit more fun than that. And then when someone says, oh, this module doesn't need any XS, or it's pure Perl, you go look at it and you go, oh, it's using B, or it's using listutil. Nah. Pure Perl means it can run with mini Perl in bootstrapping and does not load any shared objects. So I have a very restricted view of the world at that level. And then I come in to write a CPAN module and I think, I could use some stuff. And then I thought, because the counter to this in the core, by the way, is if you're running bootstrapping code, you've got the most current version with all the syntax features which you can use, and there's no worry about backcompat because you build a Perl from nowhere, from C compiler, and then you run it immediately. So it turns out if you set your minimum Perl version to 5.20 or better, you can use post-deref. It's 95% there. I've forgotten what the other 5% that's buggy is, but you can use it. What's missing is you couldn't string interpolate post-deref. That's the arrow with the @ star and so on, like do the whole array that way. You can't do string interpolation, but I don't need string interpolation, and I know it keeps working the same way from 5.20 onwards. So sure, you tell it not to have experimental warnings for this thing, but those were there to say, we might change this in the future. We're in the future now. You can do that. Likewise, you can use the R operator on substitute to return the result. I think that's 514. That's in. It's stable. You can use key value slices in hashes because they come in at some point about then. And actually, it turns out if you target 520 as your minimum version of Perl, you actually get quite a nice dialect of Perl that is something like 97% of the user base is using. So that was an observation that it turned out that is quite a good target, I feel. The next one, so you might have heard of conference-driven development. You know, where you say you're going to do a talk, and then, I need to write the code. You know, that comes before the slides. What we had here was actually, and this is a variant of called a satire of test-driven development, where you write the test first. So you do the conference submission, and then you write the code. We have blog-driven development. So Lee, my colleague, currently hiding in New Zealand, wrote this blog entry. And I had the draft of this blog entry, and he had that command line in there to set the date range. He wants to go from this date to that date. There are from and to arguments, by the way, as well as show. And that's the code to show it. And I tried testing this, and I get that error. Oh, date, invalid argument second for -i. I assumed it was a feature missing on OS X. I think he tried it on Linux. I can't remember. He's got a similar machine to me, but it was a good chance to do that. So we added a feature. I thought, why are you writing a blog post with all this blah? I can do that in Perl. So the to, from, and show started taking ISO datetime formatted thingies for that. So yeah, we have blog-driven development where a feature release was made to make a blog post cleaner. I thought this was cool. There's a structural lesson from this thing. The command line parser is done as a module. The code in the actual script is pretty much those lines. I've stripped the comments out. It sets the version of main to be the same as one of the module versions. It calls a parse-argv function in the CLI parser module. It passes in pod to usage because, what the next slide will show, this is a complete swear word to test, but it passes in that. So in the default case, you get regular pod to usage. I want to capture that I want to use a different subroutine for testing to capture output. And it passes in regular argv. That splits the command line into the start time, the end time, an output object, and an array of input things as it split the command line. I then build a crontab up from the input arguments, and I run a formatter from the output arguments, and then I print the format. I render and print it. And that's pretty much the main script. What that means is that all my funky CLI parsing is off in a module, and I can write regression tests by instantiating a module and calling methods on it. And I can call, for example, parse argv with a different subroutine that captures output for instead of real pod to usage, which I think was where I got to next, because it turns out that testing these two is the most ugly thing I've had to do. They are lovely features. That's why there's main version. Auto version, if you do -- version, will say, this is this script, that version. And by doing that start at the front of setting main version to module version, I now have a script version that automatically reflects my CPAM module, providing I keep that correct, and pause keeps me honest on that. And there's auto help, which will do -- help. Oh my, what do you have to do to test these? Well, it will issue a warning through warning mechanism, so you have to localize sigwarm to capture that. And then you override a particular subroutine within Getopt long to do that. Then you get called in that subroutine, you collect @ to remember what arguments you were called with, so you can test those in a moment. The trouble is the Getopt long code expects that subroutine it calls to splat stuff to throw warnings or splat to standard error, and then exit. If you override that subroutine to one that does not exit, you carry on through the regular code base and reach places it didn't think you were ever going to get to. And great. So I had to emulate exit in my testing subroutines with goto, where I go to out of the subroutine back a bit further down my code. Remove glasses before banging head on desk. And only then can you die, Because if you die in the wrong way, I can't remember, something didn't work. So yeah. I got some notes. Because internally they're using the generic code callback mechanism, which is good in terms of code reuse. But I think the generic code callback mechanism is not expecting the code to... That's it. If your code dies, it says, hey, I called the callback, but it died. If your code exits, it never gets there. Yeah, you can't die as there's an eval to avoid and a go to. So hence there is a go to immediately closing an eval. So my test script has to have go to and then die and then I'll wrap that in test fatal. And the last, technically, actually not. One of the annoyances was the JSON object. I did hit one limitation of Getopt long. I can have a JSON command line. I can have JSON with an option of pretty. But I wanted... but the trouble is if I do that, number 2, and say JSON can take options. So I can have JSON of pretty, JSON... I can't remember what the options were, but there was pretty and a couple of others. But I want... If I enable that option, Getopt long is too helpful. It will make these two exist, and both of them be equivalent to the previous one. Sorry, to be the... wrong way around. It will make JSON space pretty be JSON sets value pretty. But what I want is to only be allowed to set the option with an equal sign. So that if I have JSON space pretty, it means turn on JSON with its defaults and render me the cron tab called pretty. In other words, I want it to be the same as .pretty, the file pretty in the current directory, and with JSON turned on. So it has an option argument. I want to say I have options, but if you have an argument to the option, it must come with an equal sign. And I simply couldn't find a way to get Getopt long to do this. So my JSON --JSON parsing is special cased in my code, which is slightly ugly. And I admit there's kind of a bug. Getopt long defaults to case insensitive parsing, but JSON is lowercase only. I think I'm going to make another release and break the world for my 0 known users by saying, tell Getopt long that everything's lowercase, because I don't like mixed case parsing. So that is all my bonus slides, and I have taken 43 minutes. I can stick up that, which apparently does work. I talk too much, but are there any questions, or has everyone just gone, whoa, yes? Oh, wait, microphone coming. I hope that works.
So, two things. Two things that I noticed about the whole cron thing. Cron supports a TZ variable.
Yeah.
Instead of the TZ sleep thingamajig that you mentioned.
Yeah, this is reasonable. I think all our 4 machines have the time zone set to be GMT, and I think we like it that way.
No, so in the Crontab you can set TZ equals Canada, and then the times in the Crontab are interpreted as Canadian times, which probably would result in you having to special case TZ.
Yes.
But then you can avoid the whole sleep stuff.
I wasn't aware of that, but this makes sense. But I'm trying to test the existing Crontabs.
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah,
you guys can eventually port the Crontabs to not sleep. But yeah, Man 5 Crontab.
Thank you.
My other thing is, well, Getopt does support case sensitive, so there's
I hadn't turned that. No. Yeah, I wanted to do that. I hadn't done that, is what I meant. Yeah. And I only realized that when I came to write the JSON parser and went, oh, my parser's case sensitive, and actually all my other options are already case insensitive because that's the default. So I don't know if I'm mangling your question, answering it, or explaining what I did. I know that Getopt long can do that. I didn't realize it wasn't the default. I would have liked it to be my default.
Yeah. Definitely. It's like every time I use Getopt long, I have a whole bunch of options that make it sane, basically. But yeah.
Maybe I want your lightning talk on how to make Getopt long sane. Where can I subscribe to your magazine? Thank you. I think we stop. Are you fine with that? Yep. Cool. Thank you for being a nice audience.